Over the last 30 to 40 years, we've been witnessing an absolutely unique phenomenon. The People's Republic of China, whatever you think about it, and I'm not really here neither to condemn nor to endorse anything about it, but if you have eyes to see, you will see economic development achieving things nobody thought were possible. Nobody understood in those days what the Chinese were doing. And in those days, it was only the beginning, and you could be excused for not paying all that much attention. They were one of many very poor countries in the world who were trying to stop being poor countries in the world. Americans might have read the novel by Pearl Buck, The Good Earth. If you ever did read that book, we had to in high school. Well, you learned what the poverty was like. It was, for a suburban kid like me, it was hard to get my head around what that kind of poverty is like. In the last 30 to 40 years, the Chinese achieved a level of economic development that took several centuries in Western Europe. And it took a good century and a half, counting conservatively, here in the United States. We've never seen anything like it. What the Chinese did was to mobilize, borrow from the rest of the world, no question, but put all that together in a successful mix. If your measuring rod is economic growth, lifting people out of poverty, and let's remember, 1.4 billion people, 4 to 5 times the population of the United States. They were able to do it. Not only that, they now compete with the United States at the highest levels of technology. What we get from Intel or Apple, they have their equivalent. And in some cases, they're already ahead of us. I'll give you an example. 10 or 15 years ago, every major car-producing company in the world undertook a program to develop the electric car, the electric vehicle, to replace the fossil fuel burning oil and gas vehicle. And we have many examples of that being produced. However, one example outranks everybody else. The electric cars of China are better and cheaper than anybody else's. They won the competition. That happens all the time. Other companies in other countries at other times won equivalent competitions. The response of the United States has been to impose a tariff to make the better, cheaper electric car from China unaffordable. The current rate of tariff applied by the Biden government is 100%. So, for example, if the electric car from China costs you $30,000 that have to be sent to China to pay for the car, you've got to give them, to the car dealer, $30,000 to pay off the Chinese, and another $30,000, 100%, goes to Uncle Sam, so that the cost to an American would be $60,000 for that $30,000 car, okay? There are no electric cars from China on the road in the United States. A quarter of the electric cars on the road in Europe are the Chinese cars. The greatest producer, the most successful, the most rapidly growing car company in the world, most Americans have never heard of. It has 3 initials, B as in boy, Y, and D as in dog, BYD Corporation. The response of the United States is to freeze them out. This is self-defeating and, to be an economist for a moment, stupid. Why? Everywhere else in the world, as the transition to electric vehicles is underway, every competitor of the United States across all industries will be able to buy the best car at $30,000 with which to compete with the American company, whereas the American company is going to have to pay more than $30,000 for the non-tariff equivalent, which will cost you $40,000 to $50,000 for an inferior vehicle. When I went to school and they taught me economics, this is somewhere between self-defeating and stupid, and a little bit of both. When I got my PhD in economics at Yale years ago, my classmate was a woman. I remember her because she was unusual. Her name was Janet Yellen. Okay, she's now the Secretary of the Treasury in the United States government. I know that she knows it's self-defeating. She knows it's stupid. She's out there advocating it because that's the position of the government. The United States is losing the competition with China. This is a self-defeating behavior, typically of somebody who's desperate. Instead of outcompeting the Chinese, coming up with a plan to try at least to do that, you are, lifting up the barriers. They tell themselves in Washington that they're isolating the Chinese. They're not. They're isolating themselves. The rest of the world looking at the United States, and they see an empire going down, and they get the pleasure that comes from that. And we ought to wake up as a nation and figure this out. Every part of the poor world, and the poor world is the vast majority of Asia, Africa, Latin America, for sure, plus large parts of North America and Europe too. They all wanted 40 years ago to do something, but the Chinese actually did it. That's the question that has to be asked. Did they build on what went before? Absolutely. Absolutely they did. The Chinese, for example, and this is misrepresented in the West, again, for defensive reasons. People say that Chinese built on the West's technology. That's true. Of course that's true. But the Chinese didn't do that in any mysterious way. 25 years ago, they made a decision that they would say to the developed world whom they hoped to imitate, the United States, Western Europe, Japan, and so on. We will give you a deal. We understand you're capitalists. We understand that profit is the bottom line, blah, blah, blah. And here's what we're going to give you. Two things. Number one, an educated, disciplined, incredibly cheap labor force. And number two, the biggest growing market in the world. In a business school, we tell budding young entrepreneurs, if you want to know where to go and focus your energy, go where the labor is cheap and the market is growing. Okay, they went to China. And they went because they did exactly what we told them to do. They made a ton of money. That forced all of those who were not yet ready to do that to realize if you don't go to China too, these guys are going to outcompete you. They're going to bring that stuff back, made with cheaper labor, and they have their own, the Chinese market. You know, General Motors now sells more cars in China than it does in the United States. These are the developments, and everybody wanted to do it, but the Chinese did it. And the whole organization called the BRICS is an organization that is internationalizing the Chinese model. And that too ought to worry the United States a great deal more than it currently does.